All right, let's jump into a world of magic and wonder today. We're diving deep into Chinese fairy tales, specifically the ones about female immortals.
Ah, yes.
Powerful goddesses, clever sorceresses,
Right.
and those who sort of, earned immortality through these incredible feats. We've got some excerpts here from a book called, well, it's in Chinese, but the title translates to Fairy Tales, from Folklore to New Era Culture.
Okay.
And well, let me tell you,
Yeah.
you won't believe the twists and turns we're going to find as we, trace how these tales evolved and how different people, different perspectives shape their meanings.
People often think of fairy tales as simple stories, unchanging over time, but they'd be so surprised. These stories are dynamic. They evolve alongside the cultures that tell them. They're like windows into different eras, reflecting how values and beliefs change.
Exactly. It's like, they hold up this mirror to society, right?
Yeah.
You can see what people valued, what they feared, and even how they viewed women in different times.
Hmm.
And speaking of women, the book, very cleverly, categorizes these female immortal stories into three types.
Yeah, so we have the first one called Record of Events. This is where a female immortal swoops in to save the day. Imagine a village facing a drought or a fierce beast, and suddenly, boom, a powerful goddess appears, wielding magic, restoring balance.
Those sound pretty epic, like ancient superhero tales almost.
Yay.
Then there's the Cultivation to Immortality. Love that name, by the way.
Yeah.
It's all about a mortal woman's journey to becoming immortal.
Mm.
Makes you wonder what trials they face, what secrets they had to uncover.
It's a journey of transformation and self-discovery. It speaks to that human desire to transcend our limitations.
Right.
And then, of course, we have the love story category, which, as you might guess, gets pretty complex.
Yeah, I bet.
We're talking about relationships between female immortals and mortal men, but the book really cautions us against applying, like, our modern ideas of love to these ancient tales.
I can see why. I mean, love and relationships are always complicated, but trying to understand them in a totally different culture, historical context, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this so intriguing, right?
Right.
Okay, so the book highlights some very imaginative love story tales. And there's one in particular I'm dying to get into. It's from a collection, Xingxian Ganyu Zuan, compiled by a Taoist priest.
Yeah.
And it involves a father, three sons, and, well, a tempting offer.
Okay.
So this father, Yao Shen, had three sons. And let's just say they weren't the sharpest tools in the shed.
Right.
I mean, they were so academically challenged, he basically sent them to a mountain house, hoping isolation would force them to study.
Sort of out of sight, out of mind parenting, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I guess even fresh mountain air couldn't inspire those guys.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Months went by, and their academic progress was, well, let's just say it was non-existent. But then, one day, this noblewoman appears, and she offers a solution. Marriage to her three daughters.
Okay.
And get this. She promises that if the sons can keep a secret for 100 days, they'll gain immortality and worldly success.
Okay, that's a deal I might even take, even if I wasn't academically challenged.
Yeah.
But, given their limitations, they probably needed a little extra help to uphold their end of the bargain.
Exactly. So the noblewoman brings in some serious high-powered tutors. Like, we're talking Confucius himself, followed by Jiang Ziya, the legendary military strategist.
Wait, Confucius?
Yeah.
Isn't he like the ultimate symbol of wisdom and scholarship?
Right.
To bring him in to tutor these, well, academically challenged sons, there's a sense of humor there.
Yeah.
Like, the author wasn't afraid to play around with some pretty revered figures. I wonder what Confucius would have thought about all of this.
It's almost like the author's winking at us, saying, hey, don't take things too seriously.
Right.
But humor aside, under the tutelage of these legendary figures, the sons undergo this remarkable transformation. They become not only intelligent and skilled, but also, get this, handsome. It's like learning itself had a beautifying effect.
They became handsome just from studying.
Yeah.
Maybe there's hope for us all.
You never know.
But sadly, as with most fairy tales, there's a catch.
Of course. The father, Yao Shen, he hears whispers of what's going on. Convinced that his sons have fallen under some kind of mountain ghost spell, he brings them back home, breaking the 100-day secret.
Oh, no. They were so close to immortality and worldly success. What happened then?
Well, the family tutor, a wise old gentleman, points out that they've missed this golden opportunity. Looking up at the stars, he explains that the dimming of Jinva, Wunuv, and Zhinü signifies their descent to the mortal world.
Okay.
These weren't just any women, they were celestial beings.
And Jin was one of them. You mean like the Weaving Maid from the famous Qing Festival story? I thought she was happily married to Nulong, the Cowherd. What's she doing getting remarried?
Yeah.
And twice, no less.
It's almost like their authors deliberately challenging that traditional image of Zhinü, the passive, love-struck character. This story suggests she might, have a mind of her own and perhaps isn't completely satisfied with her celestial marriage.
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, makes you really think, huh? And speaking of questioning things, the book even mentions other Tang Dynasty tales where Zhin looks for happiness outside her marriage with Nulong.
Really?
Oh, yeah. In one story, she tells a mortal lover that her trip down to Earth, it's like natural law, and she doesn't even care if Nulong finds out.
Wow, that's quite a statement. A celestial being just like breaking the rules.
Yeah.
You go, girl. It's like she's saying even immortals deserve a shot at happiness, and she's not going to let anyone, control her choices.
Exactly.
It's refreshing to see this side of her, the one who takes charge.
Absolutely. It shows us that even the stories we think we know can have these surprising hidden depths. These Tang Dynasty authors are like, hey, celestial beings have complicated love lives too. Maybe Zhinü isn't so meek and love-struck after all.
Right. It really makes you wonder about the other side of the story, What about Nilang? Is he actually the devoted husband we've always thought he was?
Good point.
To get a clearer picture, maybe we should go back to the very beginning, the roots of the story.
You're right. Going back to the source can shed some light on things. The book points to a story from Sushinji, which is called The Feather-Clothed Woman, and it's considered pretty close to the original.
Okay.
So in this version, there's this guy, and he steals the feather clothes of a woman who's bathing. It forces her to become his wife.
Hold on, that doesn't sound very romantic. It's more like a kidnapping and coercion.
Exactly. This story isn't about, love-struck soulmates destined to be together. It's about a woman whose agency is taken away. And in this version, she has 3 daughters with him. And years later, with their help, she gets her feather clothes back and escapes.
Wow.
And she even comes back later with smaller feather clothes for her daughters so they can join her in the celestial realm.
That's a powerful story of resilience and freedom. It totally flips the script,
Yeah.
Instead of a heartbroken wife, we have this, resourceful woman fighting to be free, fighting to reunite with her children.
It is. The book even mentions that female students applauded when the mother escaped with her kids. It's clearly a scene that resonates with defying those patriarchal expectations.
I can imagine those students cheering her on. It must have been so satisfying to see her break free from this forced marriage, reclaim her power. What's interesting, though? There's no queen mother in this version.
That's right. The focus is all on the woman's agency, her cleverness in planning her escape. The queen mother, who's often portrayed as the antagonist who separates the lovers, she's not even there in the original story.
That's a huge difference. So the version we know, with the queen mother as this villain, is something that came later. Why do you think that is?
Well, the book talks about how the story evolved, both on stage and in those oral storytelling traditions.
Right.
Traditional opera performances, they were mostly for male audiences, and they often included scenes that, well, from Zim's perspective, might be considered a little exploitative.
Like that scene where Nilang teases her with her stolen clothes?
Yeah, that one.
The book mentioned it could go on forever. The audience just loving it. It's hard to see that scene from Zim's point of view,
It really highlights those contrasting viewpoints within the different versions. Oral storytelling, though, which was often done by women, tended to incorporate more of their lived experiences.
Right.
So potentially it shaped a more sympathetic portrayal of Zhin.
That's fascinating how the same story can be told in such different ways, reflecting who's telling it. It makes you realize there's never just one version, But where does the Queen Mother fit into all of this? She's a big deal in the version we all know.
Well, here's another twist for you. Ready for this?
Okay.
In a lot of the traditional folk versions, the Queen Mother isn't actually a villain. In fact, she often helps Zimph.
Really? The Queen Mother isn't always the one tearing the lovers apart. That's the opposite of what I always thought.
One version even describes her as a mediator.
Interesting.
She gives Jim a choice: live with her husband or go back to her celestial home. This actually leads to the whole Qixi festival setup, where they can meet once a year.
That's so different. It's amazing how much these interpretations can vary. We've got the Queen Mother as a villain, as a helper, and sometimes she's not even there. But how did we go from all these folk traditions to this one dominant version we have today? What happened?
Yeah, it's like the story took on a life of its own, changing and morphing through time. It makes you wonder how many other stories that we think we know have been, reshaped or reinterpreted across history. Oh, it happens all the time. Stories are powerful. They can reflect beliefs, but they can also be used to shape them, right? And in the New Lang and Zim story, well, it took a pretty big turn in 20th century China. After the People's Republic was founded in 1949, there was this push to reshape those traditional stories to align them with, well, with the ideology at the time.
So even fairy tales weren't safe from the political landscape?
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense, though, when a new order comes into power, they want to control the narrative. But how did this affect the story of New Lang and Zim? Did they become, like, communist revolutionaries?
Not quite revolutionaries, but they did become symbols of the working class.
Okay.
This writer, Ye Xingtao, he took on the task of revising the story. He turned it into this tale about class struggle. In Yu Lang and Jim, they were once a celestial weaver and a simple cowherd, but they became these, like, representatives of the hardworking masses.
So their love story became like a metaphor for the struggle of the working class against oppression. That's a pretty big shift from the original folktales.
It was. It was a strategic move. The rural life of Niu Lang and Jin, it was romanticized. And the Queen Mother, who was, sometimes a complex figure, even helpful to Zinem in some versions, she became this symbol of feudal oppression, trying to destroy their happiness.
Sounds like they basically rewrote the whole thing to fit a political agenda.
Yeah.
It's the power of storytelling, right?
It
You
is.
can use it to reinforce any ideology. But the book did mention that Ye Shengtao, he was careful to link his revisions to, like, ancient poetry, that literary tradition. Was he trying to make it seem less like, propaganda?
Yeah, he wanted to give it the sense of legitimacy, despite the fact that it was so different from those original folk versions. By drawing on lines from classic poems that emphasized, the pain of separation and the enduring power of love, he tried to create a sense of continuity with the past, even though the story was, well, significantly altered.
It's amazing how much thought went into reshaping this, seemingly simple fairy tale. It makes you realize how much our understanding of these stories has been shaped by history and politics.
For sure. And it really highlights how important it is to question the narratives that we're given, to explore different perspectives. Even a story as familiar as Nulong and Jin, it's got these hidden depths and complexities that challenge our assumptions.
So what does this all mean for us now? I mean, why should we care about the evolution of a Chinese fairy tale? We're not living in ancient China, and we're not facing, oppression from a celestial queen mother.
These stories, these myths, they're not just things of the past. They show us how cultures evolve, how values change, how power dynamics work. They reflect anxieties and hopes, the fears of the people who told them. And by understanding the different perspectives in these stories, we can understand our own world better and the narratives that shape it.
It's like these stories are a code, and once you crack it, you see those patterns repeating throughout history. And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding, right?
Yeah.
We start with something familiar, and then boom, we uncover all these layers of meaning, interpretations we never expected.
Exactly. And it shows us that there's rarely just one version of any story. There are always multiple perspectives, interpretations just waiting to be found. And it's by engaging with those different viewpoints that we can, get a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world.
All right, let's wrap things up. We've seen how Chinese fairy tales, especially the ones about those female immortals, are far from static. They've evolved, reflecting changing cultural norms and values.
We've also seen how even a well-known story like Nulong and Zin has a long history of different interpretations. The version we usually hear, with the Queen Mother as the villain and this celebration of rural life, it's a pretty recent invention, shaped by the politics of the 20th century.
And most importantly, we've learned that looking at things from different angles, male versus female, traditional versus modern, it can lead us to a much deeper understanding of these stories. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to question.
So think about the fairy tales, those myths you grew up with. How might they be different if told from a different perspective? What cultural and historical forces shaped their meaning? I encourage you to, take a deep dive into those stories you think you know. You might be surprised what you find.
That's a great note to end on. It's like we've been given a key to unlock a whole new world of understanding. And on that note, we'll leave you to your own explorations. Until next time, keep diving deep.